Transition partners take mental health very seriously. We are now supporting Claro Mental Health Charity, who are local and based in Harrogate. We are working closely with Richard Kenny, who is the IT director at TechBuyer. Claro operates as a commercial workshop making goods for businesses which enable those with long-term mental health conditions to function in a voluntary real work environment. We would love it if you can join us in supporting this amazing cause and charity and donate what you can. Any amount would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much, and thanks to all our listeners.
Hi, this is the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. My name's Elly Greening.
And my name's Sandra Stewart.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing some of the UK's greatest tech leaders. We'll be discussing war stories, battle scars, and their learnings from their journeys.
Hopefully, you will pick up some great tips, learn from others' experiences, and have a good laugh along the way.
Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. So this week on the pod, we've got Paul Thomas, who is the Head of Information Technology at Lhasa Limited in Leeds. So Lhasa is a non-for-profit organisation and an educational charity that facilitates collaborative data sharing projects and thereby delivering public benefit. Paul is ex-British Forces, where he was selected as a finalist in the British Forces Business Awards 2019, and we're extremely excited to have Paul on the show to talk about all of his story, his background in the forces, and how he transitioned into tech and into the leadership position he's in today. Hello, Paul.
Hi, thank you for having me, and delighted to be here.
Hi, Paul. I love that use of transition in that. Did you notice that, Paul?
Very apt.
I can't help it. Everything I always say transition this and transition that. So it's just inbred in me now, I think.
Almost migrated.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's great to finally have you on board. We've on the show. We've talked a few times, haven't we, about getting you on, and you've been to a few of our events, and I know you've met some of our other guys, and you're always talked about in our office, by the way. Everyone thinks you're great background, good presence, so it'd be really good to start with. Just find out a little bit more about your journey. Obviously, you didn't. Quite a lot of people actually that we've had on this pod have started from, kind of in some sort of tech role. Your background and you start your career into tech is a bit different to everyone else's. So it would be really good to understand that a little bit more and how that's impacted, in a positive way, your career into tech. So let's hear more from you then.
Sure. Once I'd left school and realised my dreams of becoming a professional sportsman were shattered, I was trialling at what at the moment is a championship side. But
Oh, wow.
And I used to play youth cricket for Worcestershire County Cricket Club as well. And I know shouting those words out in West Yorkshire is probably not a popular. But when I soon realised that my destiny wasn't becoming a professional sportsman, I thought the opportunity of further education didn't excite me. So I ran off to go and join the Royal Navy, which I did at the ripe old age of 16.
Wow. A baby.
Yeah, but very much so. But in hindsight, it was the best decision ever. I served 26 years in the end.
Amazing.
Been around the world, did some super exciting stuff, and done some super challenging stuff. Iraq as an example, been across to the Caribbean to work with the US Coast Guard to do the counter narcotics work.
Wow.
So and across over to the Somali coast to do some counter piracy stuff, and that's really my background.
You got some right interesting stories to tell us.
Can we go for a pint later? Everything. You'll have to write some memoirs.
Sure. But certainly for the last 10 or 15 years of my career, it was generally either around people management or project and program management. And I was fortunate to have been in a position where I facilitated a program of work, which part of that brought in some leading females from industry to kind of really give the Royal Navy a bit of an education of how we can certainly tap into female talent from STEM backgrounds, so science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And I put on a couple of workshops, and one of those workshops, Anna Barsby come along to, and you'll be familiar with Anna. Anna, she was the CIO of Holford's at the time, but then went on to be the CIO of Morrisons, and she's set up her own management consultancy now, Tessian. So Anna gave me a call when she'd gone to the Morrisons job and asked me if I would be interested in joining her on the IT leadership team up in Morrisons. So it didn't take me long to flip the coin and said, yeah, that sounds like a good opportunity to me. So I resigned from the Navy.
Wow. Were you planning on, like, were you getting to a stage where you were ready to leave the forces? Or
No, not at all.
Completely.
Wow. Obviously, you've been with them for a long time. It's quite big.
It's a complete broadside, really. But yeah, Anna's phone call was early July as I was heading up to the Open Golf Championships at Troon. 7 weeks later, on the 26th of September, I'd started in Morrisons as the head of IT program office.
My God.
So that transition was pretty quick because generally leaving the military, once you've submitted your resignation, there's a 12-month transition and a 12-month notice period. So for me to have left in 7 weeks is pretty quick. And for
that's scary as well in itself, isn't it? Because I know I've got a friend that was in the Marines for like 10 years, and then when he left and came into like the corporate world, he was really, really nervous about it. I
think that learning journey of the ways of working that don't get me wrong, do you know what? There's an awful lot of similarities in how people go about their business, but I think there's just a general way of working from a military background to certainly a corporate background, which at times I found challenging, but again it just taps into my adaptability in kind of, do you know what, people think I'm quite quiet at times, but I'm just taking a step back to kind of read the room, understand the environment, and then perhaps make a decision or come up with some input afterwards. But yeah, that transition was quite tough, and Morrisons was quite a fast-paced, ferocious environment as well. So do you know what? I look back on it, great move, great opportunity, and I'm really glad I made that decision.
Fantastic. And to tell us a little bit more about your journey at Morrisons, because I think you had a couple of job changes, didn't you, at Morrisons?
Yeah, sure. So when Anna implemented her plan, I was the head of the program office and PMO for 2 years. Then, because there was a little bit of restructure in and around how we supported the business over the Christmas peak trading period, I went across to lead that piece of work over Christmas, 2017, and then the opportunity came up for a head of technology for service operations. So I put my name in the hat for that, and I was the head of IT service ops for 12 or 13 months before moving to Vet Partners the summer of last year.
Fantastic, amazing. And then you went to Vet Partners as head of IT.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. What's tell us a little bit more about your remit of your role there, and I guess maybe a couple of the challenges and how you overcame some of the challenges that other people might be able to learn from.
Sure. So the role of vet partners, small. So the breadth of my responsibility was all back end infrastructure, data center out through to the applications that the colleagues were using out in the practices, all the other ad hoc bits of IT that certainly the networking that the practices would consume. The larger ERP program delivery was run by the head of program, so it was only really the small project delivery on my side and IT operational management. Really great opportunity over at Vet Partners, a completely different model to Morrisons. They're PE backed, so again there's a different way of working, of how to tap into some much needed IT financial resourcing, but certainly through, and the way that the Vet Partners and veterinary practices joined the group, that overcoming that mergers and acquisitions piece, because lots of independent veterinary practices, a lot of their vets that just do a bit of IT on the side and largely manage their own back office IT within their practice. So, goodness me, inheriting the good, the bad, and the ugly. Really. So there were practices in some parts of the country that were running MS-DOS software applications, and we couldn't change the infrastructure because there was just no compatibility. But the practice were absolutely dependent on that application. So yeah, it was quite a frightening experience sometimes going into practices and opening cupboard doors, and after you've cleared the layers of dust, you see a server sat there buzzing away. And again, lots of companies that joined our group either had local IT support from independent IT companies dotted around the country, but certainly consolidating all of that IT into something that we could manage across all aspects of the life cycle was challenging, to say the least.
Cool, fantastic. And now you're at Lhasa.
Indeed, yeah.
4 weeks in, are you? 4 or 5 weeks in?
Wow.
Yeah, week 5 this week.
And how's that going for you? You said when we briefly caught up earlier that there's a lot to do, but it's a really interesting, challenging role where it sounds like you can make quite a lot of difference.
For sure. One thing that really impressed me in my first week is the team that I've joined. Not only the senior management team and the passion that they deliver on a day-to-day basis for the business, but all aspects, the scientists, the software delivery team, and certainly in my area of infrastructure and operations, I'm really thankful that I've got a talented bunch of individuals that, yes, we do need to grow, and we do in order to be able to support the business on their journey. But no, I'm really pleased that we've got a talented group of individuals that I'm sure we can shape, add some structure, and grow to really support the business as it continues to grow.
Cool, fantastic, brilliant. So let's. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your leadership skills. Obviously, your leadership skills go back through to your forces days. Obviously you were last 10-15 years or so, while you were there, you were in a leadership role, and then you've put that experience and practice into industry within tech. So it'd be great to understand a little bit more about your leadership style and what works for you, and how I guess others could learn from that, if there's any kind of like good tips that you could share.
Yeah, sure. So as you would expect, from a military background, it's very command and control. The orders come down, everybody knows their orders back to front, inside out. So should the worst happen, the guys and girls can react in an appropriate way to whatever situation they're dealt with. So coming from that command and control environment, to some degree, it's useful. but certainly the way that I was with my teams, both in the military, and I'd like to think that I've continued a lot of that. I'm at my worst when I'm being micromanaged. So, and I guess as is everybody else. So that's really at the forefront, that the fact that, do you know what? There's an awful lot of talented people out there. Me presenting a leadership style where it constrains their thinking, it doesn't really get them to demonstrate their abilities. Just doesn't work. It doesn't work for them. It doesn't work for me. It's never going to work for the business. So certainly that's something I've brought from my military background, but actually it's having that customer focus as well, and really empowering the team to go off and make decisions. If you're unsure, stick your hand in the air and we'll have a discussion. We'll have a group discussion, but we'll get to the bottom of it. And certainly from my military days, in an operations room on a warship, you've got the commanding officer all the way down to junior operators. Those junior operators are operating radars, they're operating missile systems, they're operating sonars in pretty high threat, high intensity environments. But those junior operators are looking at a radar display exactly the same as the captain. But the captain might, because he's looking or she's looking and making decisions at a much higher level, might miss something. So that junior operator could spot something that can save the day. So it's giving people the opportunity to unlock that golden nugget that is going to solve the problem. And whereas the Navy was very hierarchical and very structured, actually creating a flatter organisation that everybody has a say, everybody has a part to play, everybody understands and is part of creating that vision and our roadmap and our journey. That level of empowerment is so valuable in this environment of software delivery, because all of a sudden there's a level of, and the experts will call it psychological safety, but there's that safe environment where people aren't afraid to fail, but we create the environment where failing actually doesn't really matter, as long as we're protecting, and in this case, a production environment where business critical systems are reliant and dependent. Actually creating an environment where people can fail, people can go and test their thinking, and go and use their imagination so they can innovate and do some amazing things. And then there's some decision making, and we test stuff, and then we make an educated and informed view of whether that piece of software in this instance can go into a production environment. And again, lots of those synergies are from a military background. You have junior sailors making some really important decisions, and they should be empowered to make those important decisions because lives are on the line in their environment. But obviously in this environment, we've got some really talented, clever people doing some software delivery or some cloud engineering that, go off and show us your talent. If you've got a question, get your hand in the air, or let's have a Zoom call to have that discussion.
Love that. I love the giving the team the autonomy and the empowerment to then go off and do the great things that they're capable of. I'd love to know any tips that you've got around motivating teams. It's a common question that we get asked in the podcast, and I think particularly over the past 6 to 9 months that we've had. It's 6 months really. I'm making it 9 months. 6 months. What we've had with COVID, motivating teams is extremely important. Bringing people together. So any top tips that you've got, that would be amazing, Paul.
I think I like how I engage with people. So certainly as we stepped into lockdown over at Vet Partners, the guys, when we were in the office, it was a fairly small office. So if I had a question, I'd just spin around in my chair, ask the question, guys have solved the problem, let's get on. So all of a sudden you're creating a meeting, and the guys all of a sudden are looking over their shoulder. So, well, we're having another meeting. Well no, let's not call it a meeting. It's a 2-minute Zoom chat. That's all it is. And if I've got 4 or 5 of you on that Zoom chat, it's only exactly the same as me spinning around in my chair when we were in the office. So it's given the team the confidence, and it goes, and I think it goes back to creating that safe environment that we're all, and the analogy that I do like to use is, if you're on a warship and a torpedo goes through the side of the ship, generally the ship's going down, and everybody on that ship is going down with it. So, and it's exactly the same as in this. We develop software, we provision infrastructure, and we support the business. But if something goes wrong and we fail at something, that means we've all failed. But do you know what? Nobody's going to get hung out to dry. We're going to learn from it and not make those same mistakes again. And we move on and we continually improve. So getting that point across that we succeed together and we fail together, for me, is super important. And I'm probably jumping ahead of me. So I do a lot of coaching of youth football and cricket. And so they're both under 13s groups that I've got at the moment. And it's instilling that ethos into those teams as well, because actually I'm not really that, and I tell the boys, I'm not really that bothered about the scoreline, but as long as you've tried to apply yourself, as long as you have tried to do what we've discussed when we've been on a training field or in a nets practice, do you know what? The score doesn't matter. Go out, enjoy yourself, which is primarily what you're there to do, but try and just do your best. If we've come off and got thumped 10-0, let's go and learn from that. Let's not make the same mistakes again the following match. And again, we do transition the same thought processes into a working environment as well.
That's fantastic. So that's what you get between your spare time then?
No, that's the spare time.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Which kind of eats up then every bit of time.
Yeah, I'd love to explore that a little bit further, I guess, than like what you're passionate about, but also I'd love for you to give us any tips for anyone that's like contemplating leaving the forces. Like it's really tough, isn't it, leaving and looking at opportunities. It's notoriously a lot of businesses, there's some great companies actually in Yorkshire that try and do their piece to help ex-forces get back into the corporate world. But any tips that you've got around that or any words of advice would be really fantastic, because I know it's definitely something people struggle with.
I think, and certainly I struggled with it. I think people need to be fair on themselves, because there's a level of expectation that I joined the Navy at 16, so I was completely indoctrinated into those ways of working. So I think for lots of service leavers, it's just being fair on yourself. Don't expect too much of yourself, because the culture you're coming from and the culture you're going to is completely different. The ways of working are different, probably not vastly different, but there's certainly a lot of subtleties. And you've got career-long people that have been in the tech industry. So it's just, yes, you're adaptable because that's what those skills that you've picked up along the way in the military. But certainly, just be fair on yourself and take your time. And the mindfulness sessions that you guys have been facilitating over the course of lockdown, actually, that's really important. And certainly for somebody from a military background, it often gets overlooked. That, do you know what? There are 24 hours in the day. It doesn't have to be filled with activity. You've got to take a break and give yourself a break as well, because I think the worst level of criticism, certainly for me, is me being overly critical of myself and giving myself a hard time because you demand such high standards of yourself. And that's fine, but Rome was never built in a day. So it's kind of just being a little bit mindful in order to kind of take that pace back every now and again to give yourself a chance.
I can imagine that being one of the probably toughest challenges to make that transition is getting out of that mindset,
Sure.
and ensuring that it then isn't passed on to your team. And I can just imagine that's quite a tough, difficult challenge. So you mentioned earlier about the coaching. I think it'd be quite interesting to find out a bit more about like what coaching or training that or any courses that you personally have been on for yourself to make you a good leader or a successful leader? Is there anything that you would recommend to others that would be interested in following your footsteps that's helped you along the way?
So throughout the military, as you progress through the different ranks in the military, you have leadership and development courses for each rank that you progress up. And I was fortunate enough when I was a Warrant Officer 1 to go on the intermediate command and staff course that's run at the Defence Academy. So that really does give you the tools to be able to lead and manage small teams, big teams. But I think you wouldn't necessarily know it, and people probably wouldn't describe me as it. But I am a bit of a geek in terms of I like to read a lot. So getting into, I'm not a fan of non-fiction. So getting into books where you can read about people's lives, people's experiences, the realities of people themselves. For me, and it goes back to what are the top tips. It's taking the time for people and listening. And one of the guys that I was fortunate that used to mentor me when I was in the Navy. Don't try and change the world overnight. Take your time to learn and understand, and certainly he took that from his experience in Sierra Leone, and I tried to take that from my experience in Iraq. We were never going to change the Iraqi military in the way that the British Navy go about their business, but you know what? There's an awful lot of stuff that they can do, and they can do very, very well. And again, it's listening to people, understanding what makes them tick, and then we can progress thereon. And again, I take that from the coaching of the youngsters for football and cricket as well. These boys and girls watch the Premier League football week in, week out. They watch Test match cricket. They're in Leeds. They're fortunate to go and watch live first-class cricket and international cricket at Headingley. That they see the professionals and get up and close and personal. But yeah, that constant improvement, that constant drive, and listening to what these young people have to say, it for me is super important, because you just kind of adapt to what they say, and you know what, all of a sudden there's a great learning point for them to go off.
Fantastic, brilliant. What would you touched on taking time in tech events earlier, and I think you've been to all of them, haven't you, so far? One of the things I wanted to ask you was like how you manage your stress of leadership, because leadership, when you're at the top, it can be a lonely, stressful place. How do you manage the stress of it all, and how do you keep yourself sane and healthy?
To some degree, I didn't manage it particularly well when I first left the military. And being in the military, you get very good at compartmentalizing stuff that you've either experienced or come across. So it just gets shoved at the back, locked in a box, and the keys thrown away, and you move on to the next, onto the next thing. But again, I think it goes back to taking time for yourself. And understanding the situation that you're in, whether it's a problem that the team needs to solve collectively, a problem that an individual needs to solve, or just extending a little bit of empathy that somebody's personal circumstances may well have changed, and they may need either an arm put around them and to talk to them, or just a little bit of space to go and work it out for themselves. But for me, we went and bought a dog just before lockdown.
Good timing.
It was brilliant timing, and we managed to get the injections in before all the vets shut down as well. But actually, that forced me into some time where I go and walk the dog for an hour in the morning and just think about not an awful lot. And and then exactly the same in the evening. So there was almost some enforced well-being time to kind of have that break. But do you know what? Something that really does keep me sane is coaching the youngsters. I love it. Watching them thrive. And whilst I've only been up in Yorkshire since 2016, the team that I've got now, over the course of the last 3 years, have made some super progress on the football pitch. And some of the boys that I coach at cricket, that they're doing really well with North Yorkshire, and hopefully
Cool.
some of them will get picked up onto the Yorkshire pathway. So it's really lovely to see those youngsters thriving and enjoying their sport. So again, keeping that, for me, I've been a sportsman since I was a youngster. So watching other people do really well.
Nice to keep your hand in it still, I guess, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I was never going to make it professionally, so
Sounds like you're pretty close.
Yeah.
if I can facilitate somebody else doing it, then that's cool.
But it's so tough, isn't it, for people like young kids when they put their heart and soul into sport and then they don't quite get there, and there's so many kids that end up getting lost and finding it really tough. And yeah, I think the military, it sounded like it was the right opportunity at the right time for you. But I definitely get the piece around like managing the stress, because I imagine once you've been, like you say, you served some big tours there, like you did some amazing things for our country, but like when you come away from it and then you've got a job and you're kind of managing the stress of what's going on at, say, Morrisons, but then you must be kind of in your head like, this isn't like nothing like what my old colleagues are up to, and like managing that stress, that must have quite a big impact.
Sure, and I used to discuss this with my peer group over at Morrisons, the fact that, well, lives aren't necessarily on the line in what we're doing here, but we are accountable to the shareholders and we are accountable to the executive committee. So whilst lives aren't necessarily on the line, our salaries are on the line, because the company needs to perform. We need to make a profit. We need investors coming into the business to continue to make it profitable, and that innovation needs to continue in order for the company to be able to survive in a very, very competitive market. So
Yeah, of course.
I think, whilst there's no lives on the line, there's still purpose there, and it's getting that team to invest in that purpose.
Definitely. So I'd love to end the podcast. I mean, you just started your new role, so you've got loads of exciting stuff going on, but I'd love to find out, like, what are you most excited about over the next 6 to 12 months? Positive things that you've got going on, any big conferences or anything? Well, we're not attending as much, but any virtual things that you've got to look forward to would be amazing.
I think certainly for the team I've recently joined, the model that we currently adopt, lots of the applications that the team deliver are hosted either on our infrastructure or they're bundled up and hosted on members' infrastructure or desktops. So we're transitioning into more of a SaaS model. So the members will consume software as a service. So we're just on that journey now of AWS, Azure, cloud environments to really. So that cloud journey, we're certainly in the embryonic stages of that. But growing a team to be able to deliver that 24/7, 365 days of the year. We've got global organizations, big global organizations, as part of our members community that consume these services. So we're almost in a transition from business hours Monday to Friday to 24/7, 365.
Wow.
So that journey is really exciting. And then you've got the back office piece of part of the technology department facilitating our internal customers, all of our colleagues that consume IT. So, and again, there's not an awful lot of tweaking to do, but there is some tweaking to do to make sure that the IT department are structured to succeed and to support the business as we continue to grow. But yeah, it's a super exciting time. There's some great technology that's being adopted, and again, pharmaceutical software. It wouldn't be more topical in and around the the environment that we're in with COVID at the moment. So the real sense of purpose of what the software developers, the IT support, finance support, HR, every element of the business is enabling big pharmaceutical companies to simplify what they do, speed up what they do, so we can get to they can get their drugs to market a lot quicker.
Yeah, so important and crucial, right?
For sure.
So they're going to keep you busy for the next 12 months, then, at least.
At least, yeah. So no, it's a really exciting opportunity, and I'm so glad I'm part of that.
Amazing. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today and hearing your story, Paul. If anyone wants to reach out and get in touch to find out more about how you made that transition, your background to where you are today, is LinkedIn the best form of contact?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to drop me a line. More than willing to reach out to any service leavers that want some support, some help, and some guidance. And in fact, in my first week, they rather a company briefing. There was a big company briefing call, and I got on there a couple of minutes late, but just in time for my slot. And I hadn't realised there was 150 or so colleagues on the Zoom call at the time. So I gave them a brief précis of my background, and one of the guys reached out to me fairly immediately because his son was going off to do his first stage of interviews to go and join the Navy. So yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago, but no problem. I had an hour and a half on a Zoom call with him and his son, and thankfully he was successful in that first stage. So he's off to do his medicals and his fitness assessments before he has his joining date to go down to Cornwall. So yeah, any ex-military guys or girls want to reach out, just give me a nudge on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to share some of my experiences. For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Take care.
Right, cheerio.